Right, so we no fire alarm testing allowed for this evening. So should it go off, you all know where to go, and we gather under the canopy outside Waitrose. So if we move on to the main items of business, the minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of November 2017 have been available for the last 30 minutes. All those happy that I sign them? Great. Thank you very much. Amy, do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies from Councillor Nicholas Holder, Councillor Dennis Lee, Councillor Peter Martin and Councillor Tom Martin. Thank
you. Any declarations of interest?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Else has declared a pecuniary interest in item B2 and will leave the room while that item is considered.
Thank you. Members, any other declarations to make? Jolly good. Amy, any questions from the public?
Thank you, Chairman. None received.
Thank you. Steve Weaver, would you like to give us any relevant updates?
None to report this evening, Chairman.
Jolly good. Would you like to go into the performance against government targets then, please?
Thank you, yes. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. Yes, if I can take you to page 5 of your agenda papers. Back in November, the Executive requested that performance against government targets becomes a standing item on area committee agenda papers. This is the first committee meeting where we've had the relevant information available for you, and it will continue in the months to come. So performance against government targets, the table on page 5 sets out that there are 2 key measures split into 2 subcategories in respect of those. One is in respect of speed and the other in respect of quality. So the upper table is the one on speed, and you'll see for majors the target set nationally is at a minimum of 60% of applications should be determined on time. Non-majors, that's up to 70%. If I can draw your attention to the actual performance that Waverley has achieved, nearly 98% in respect of majors and 97.5% on non-majors. So that's a really, really positive situation, reflects an awful lot of hard work by the entire department in terms of liaising with applicants, working to get decisions out in the timescales that we've agreed. So absolutely no danger of falling into any trouble with government on those targets, and actually it puts Waverley in the upper echelons of performance nationally. Situation is a little bit more mixed in relation to the quality performance indicator. Now, as you may know, quality from a government perspective is of the cases that you've determined how many have been allowed at appeal. In other words, where decisions have been overturned. If I take the non-major category first, you see the target there is at a maximum of 10% should be overturned at appeal. We deal with thousands of non-major applications each year, and only a very small proportion of those go to appeal. A still smaller proportion are overturned at appeal. So you can see in the performance in the assessment period, April to 15 to March 17, only 1.56% were actually overturned at appeal. So again, no danger there in terms of from a government designation point of view. From majors, as I'm sure you're all aware, that's a slightly more challenging picture for us. At the moment, the best figure we can give is to the end of December 2017, where we're running at 6.4%. If I just explain how the performance figures are drawn up, it's based on the number of decisions that were made between the 1st of April 2015 and the 31st of March 2017, and then the government allowed a 9-month roll-on period for any appeals to be determined. Waverley's in a slightly unusual situation whereby at the end of December, we still have 10 appeals outstanding with the planning inspectorate awaiting decision. A number of those were the Farnham appeals that are tied up with other challenges, but we had 10 outstanding. If the government concludes that the end of the period is December for decisions on appeals, then we'll be at the 6.4%, which is comfortable and safe and below the threshold where we need to be worried. The government haven't confirmed that yet, but we're still waiting to find out what they're going to do. Since December, 2 of the 10 outstanding appeals have now been returned to us, major decisions. They've both been allowed. So we've ran the numbers again. We're starting to nudge up towards that 10%. What that means is we can't do anything about decisions that we've made in the past. What it means is, however, that we need to maintain a focus and diligence on the decisions that we make on our major applications, look at the messages that are coming out from them. Clearly, the local plan situation and the 5-year housing land supply situation has played a major part in our success or otherwise at appeal. And with the local plan continuing to move forward, that should improve our prospects moving forward. I'm happy to take any questions, Chairman, on general matters. If any members have any specifics that they need clarification on, that's probably a conversation better handled offline. Yeah, back to you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Steve. Yeah, very encouraging, I think. Councillor Bolton, is this a general question?
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. You must judge that.
Okay, I was just going to say, before I invited members, that if we stick to general questions, any specific sites that you're concerned about or have any queries about, if you can, speak to Steve after the meeting or tomorrow, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a general question. I think the officer mentioned that if the 2 appeals which had been allowed led to an increase, but he didn't say what the percentage was, how many of those 10 would have to be agreed as appeals to put us over the 10%?
Over to you.
5.
Okay, so a little bit worrying. Okay, fingers crossed, as they say. Right, so moving on to the items for discussion this evening. In the event of site inspections being necessary, they will be held on Monday the 5th of March at a time to be agreed at the meeting. And the first item for consideration, item B1, is reference WA 2017-2226, and the proposal is erection of extensions and alterations at Ballymoss, Thursley Road, Elstead. And Alex Inglis is going to introduce the application to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Ballymoss is located on the western side of Thursley Road in Elstead. It is within the green belt bordering the rural settlement. The site features a detached 2-storey dwelling benefiting from a private driveway with access directly off the main road. This slide shows Ballymoss as existing. The proposed extensions would be at first floor level. The existing dormer window, as a note for members, is currently not there as parts were in need of replacement and maintenance. This slide shows the elevations as approved under a previous application, WA 2017-0272. This extension would project 2.25 metres from the sides of the full 2-storey forward section of the dwelling. And this shows the elevations as proposed. So the extended area projects a further 2.55 metres from the side elevation of the forward section, totaling 4.8 metre width. And it will be set down from the ridge by 0.15 metres. This shows the existing first floor plans, not including the additional floor space that was gained under the previous application. And this slide shows the proposed floor plans. The two arrows there highlight the areas of the floor space that were gained under that previous scheme. And so the area of floor space concerned in this particular application is purely this section here at the front. Now some site photographs of the front elevation, showing the works that are currently being done with the dormer window that was in need of repair. So the matters of judgment are the impact on the green belt, the assessment of any very special circumstances, the design and impact on the visual amenity, the area of outstanding natural beauty and the area of great landscape value, and the impact on residential amenity. Officers recommend that the application be refused, as it, by reason of its bulk and mass, would result in cumulative additions that would be disproportionate to the original dwelling, and the proposal would therefore be inappropriate greenbelt development. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Alex. Members, I should say that this application is before you because I called it in. I thought it was one of those borderline cases that could benefit from a full and frank discussion by the committee. It's a property that has quite a history to it. It was up until our 2002 local plan, it was within the settlement area. If we could flick back to the location, or the block plan, or that plan there. If you look to the southwest, there's a ditch that runs along. That used to be the boundary of the village settlement. In 2002, they moved it up to the northeast boundary of Ballymoss. So it sort of fell outside. But by the time the 2002 plan was introduced, the property over its 1968 area was vastly extended. Figures vary. I mean, the officers have got a figure of 79% or something, and the applicant has a figure of 159% over and above the 100% that it was. Just last year, approval was given for the extension on the front that we saw earlier. This is just a tidying up, as far as I'm concerned, of that extension to include that small dormer window and get rid of the flat roof, etc. So, as I say, I think it's quite a minor increase over what is already approved, but I open it up to members for their thoughts. Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we get a bit het up about the term green belt sometimes in this chamber, and it's something I remember many years ago when I was first elected. I was asked to see a householder who lived in Hertmore Road, Charterhouse, who wanted to do a reasonably sized extension to a very large house with a very large plot. But Waverley was minded to refuse the size of his extension because his house was in Greenbelt, which it was. But his house was completely surrounded by other houses and, in fact, gardens, and nobody could actually see into his garden. About 4 doors away from his house is a large Peugeot dealership. Opposite is one of the largest private schools in the country. And my definition of Greenbelt is not his garden. You know, it's not an amenity for anyone in the public to walk past, enjoy. There's no far-reaching views. So sometimes we just get a little bit worried about this, and this is what I think is happening with this application, because we're looking at phrases in the reports that says harm to the greenbelt. Well, I can't see any harm to the greenbelt by this very modest extension, which I think, as the chairman has said, actually sort of tidies up a house. It'll probably make it better looking. So from a visual amenity point of view, I think it'll be an improvement. So I think I'm not minded to be with the officers on this one, because I just think it's very disproportionate. I can understand there's a rule, and we probably follow it a bit too assiduously, but this is for us to decide whether there is an impact on the green belt. I personally don't think there is. Whether this property should be in the green belt is a matter for us to look at maybe in the future. I would also add that, you know, at the same time we're looking at this and complaining about this modest extension in the green belt, we're trying to put some fields, green fields, open space in Binscombe out of the green belt so we can build on them. So, you know, we can't have it both ways. So on this one, I think there is no harm, there is no impact. It's very minor. I would approve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wheatley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to agree with Councillor Reynolds. It seems to me that this property is a victim of timing. And that seems rather sad. And I have to agree that I think what they're proposing, it improves the outlook of the building, which surely must benefit the entire area. And it's not even taking up any extra ground. So I'm afraid on this one, while normally I fight for Greenbelt, and especially as Councillor Reynolds says, my Binscombe Fields. However, in this instance, I just think, as I say, they're a victim of timing, and I'm afraid I'm likely to go against the officers.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chairman. Whilst I agree with the sort of reasoning of the last two councillors, if we have a policy, there has to be a very special reason to change the policy. The fact that it's in what looks like a built-up sort of area, it isn't. It's in the green belt. And if, we've had a few in the sort of, what I call the outreaches of Elstead and Sursley and stuff, which have been in the green belt, and we have agreed to refuse the fact that they wanted to enlarge it. Because once you start one, then it's just a knock-on effect. The fact that it might look better, I disagree. It looks perfectly right with what's been allowed. It's just making it even bigger. Their best thing is to try and have it removed from the green belt. If that's what the local plan inspector wants, the redesignation of some green belt areas, then this is probably the ideal one to go back to 2002, and then they apply again. But, you know, if we change it, there are no very special... If you could tell me, Chairman, what the very special circumstances are that allows this House to go beyond the policy of the extensions that we're allowed to do, then I might be persuaded. But I want to know what the very special circumstances are. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just... There is a get-out-of-jail card in there that RD2 has an advisory that dwellings which immediately adjoin the settlement boundary, RD2 will not apply, which is RD2 11.28 VII. So, yes.
Well, it's obviously not in my patch, but looking at the visual aids, etc., I thought that the proposed change was for the better. It looks a better building. It looks a more complete building without a flat roof and all the other problems that brings with it. Equally, the Greenbelt issue, the officers clearly have a requirement to follow the rules. We propose the rules, or the government proposes the rules, and we agree those. Officers are required to follow those rules in almost all circumstances. It's up to us to make judgment as to whether we believe in certain instances they don't apply, they don't need to apply. And that allows them to give protection to all the other places where you may think nothing should be allowed. The officers, if they use their judgment, might decide differently. I agree that it ought to be allowed, and I applaud the officers for sticking to their guns in recommending refusal.
Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chairman. If we were minded to approve this, can I direct a question to officers? Are there any conditions that we could attach to the application which would perhaps limit future extensions or control what is going to happen? I think I'm not quite clear what the question is, but I think the officers will understand. Thank you.
We once upon a time used to put informatives on that no further extensions would be looked on favourably, but I'll go back to the officers for that.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, Councillor Bolton, we do, as a matter of course, when we get to a point where we're going above and beyond the recommendations of our policy, actually apply a condition which prevents not only any subsequent PD, but any subsequent grants of permission being implemented in conjunction with this planning permission. So if members are minded to go with an alternative recommendation for approval, then yes, we would recommend that you apply a condition to restrict any further development at the site. If I can just perhaps also, whilst I'm here, comment on the very special circumstances. With regards to the supporting text to the local plan, the supporting text isn't saved text, it is simply guidance, and with regards to current Greenbelt policy, there is not an exception with regards to close proximity to a settlement in current Greenbelt policy. So even if we were to accept that as a part of our policy RD2 of our local plan, it would be out of date. So I hear what you're saying as a committee, but you need to think very carefully about what are the very special circumstances that apply to this case. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Catherine. Anybody else like to speak to this? Right, so we move to the recommendation. The recommendation is that permission be refused for the reasons set out in the agenda report. All those in agreement?
2, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Those against?
8, Chairman.
So the application is refused. Now, I know Catherine... Sorry?
The recommendation
you're
to
quite,
refuse is lost.
you're quite, the recommendation to refuse is lost. So can I have a proposal that permission be granted? Councillor Reynolds, thank you, and seconded by...
Yes, I propose we grant permission.
Thank you. Councillor Wheatley seconded, and now the officers are going to ask us to come up with some good reasons. Okay. Well, I'm harking back to the Eastern Committee, and I picked up some wording from one of the applications there. And could we say that, on balance, the committee considered that the extension would not be considered visually disproportionate to the dwelling? The proposal is of an appropriate design responding sufficiently to the existing dwelling and would not adversely change the character, appearance, bulk and setting of the existing dwelling. And although the extension would be over the 40%, it is considered not to be disproportionate and would not appear more intrusive in the landscape or otherwise detract from the rural character of the area. How about that? Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. Well, obviously, I would like to add the officer's suggestions of conditions, which she ably gave us a few moments ago.
That would be an informative rather than a condition, I think. No, it's a condition, is it? Okay, right, thank you. And conditions would be the standard conditions that go with extensions for drawing numbers, materials to match, etc., etc., etc. Have the officers anything to add to that? Have I said anything wrong? No? Okay. So, proposed by Councillor Reynolds, seconded by Councillor Wheatley. The revised recommendation is that permission be granted for the various reasons that we've just spoken about and with the conditions that we've just discussed. All those in favour, please. And those against?
2, Chairman.
That revised recommendation is carried. Thank you very much. I shall now leave you in the capable hands of my esteemed colleague, Councillor Byam. Thanks for your help, Amy.
My golden opportunity to speak on my own, which never seems to last very long, but let's see how we go on this particular application. So we're looking at WA 2017-2264, Second Wind Thursley Limited, the erection of extensions and alterations following the demolition of an existing store at the Three Horseshoes, Dye House Road, Thursley. Catherine, would you like to give your presentation?
Thank you, Chairman. The site comprises the Three Horseshoes Public House, which is located to the south of Dye House Lane. There are residential properties located to the east, west and north, with some open land to the south. The aerial photograph probably shows this a bit better. So the pub is here, sandwiched between the residential properties, open land here to the south. Just some quick site photographs. This is the front elevation. Part of the proposal is for a modest porch on the front elevation. This is the rear elevation taken from the existing pub garden. As you can see, they have an existing store building here. This is to be demolished, replaced with a purpose-built attached extension, which would include a garden bar area at the very end. There's also to be a covered walkway covering the existing path at the rear of the building. So the existing floor plan here on the left-hand side of the screen, the front of the property here, and the rear here with the store area. The proposed floor plan here on the right-hand side of the screen, as you can see, small porch here to the front, the existing store demolished, replaced with a purpose-built store with a small garden bar area and a modest covered walkway at the rear. And just to complement that, the existing elevations at the top of the slide with the corresponding proposed elevations at the bottom. As the pub has been previously extended, when taken cumulatively over and above the additional building, the current proposed extensions would be disproportionate additions. However, the proposal in this instance would provide for improved community facilities to serve the public house, and officers are satisfied in this case that there are very special circumstances to set aside the Greenbelt policies of constraint in this instance. There wouldn't be any harm as a result to the designated landscapes of the AONB AGLV, and officers are satisfied that the design is visually acceptable. There wouldn't be any adverse impact on neighbours. Officers therefore consider that the proposal would preserve the character of the conservation area also in which the public house sits. The recommendation therefore is that permission is granted subject to the conditions set out on page 34 and the accompanying informatives. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't think I need to declare an interest, but this is a good 45-minute trudge from my house, and I occasionally go with my dog. It is a well-run, well-used and community-owned pub. Let's not forget that this pub many years ago was under threat of being turned into a house, and the community rallied round and purchased the pub, and that was probably 15, maybe 20 years ago, and it's still in existence as a community-run and owned pub. And we need to preserve our pubs and things like that. It's the only pub really for some small distance in a sense. I have no objections to this. I think the outside bar is probably going to be an improvement because it's got quite a small, those of you who've been there, it is quite a small inside. And I was there the other day and suddenly was descended upon by a horde of about 30 ramblers, which made life rather difficult for everybody. So any improvements would be gratefully received. I think the porch won't detract from the front of the building. It does look in keeping, so I don't have any objection. Thank you.
Very much. Councillor Wheatley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a semi-sort of interest to declare. 15 years ago, when it was newly acquired by the community, I was its bookkeeper. So I did know the place quite well then, and I think that this application would improve it no end. It sounded, to me, round the back, it was a bit of a mess. So this would help a lot, and to have a porch at the front too would take the blockiness off the front of the building. It would enhance it. And as Councillor Reynolds has already said, being a community building, it is a centre, an amenity for the community. It's very important, and for employment too. So I'm with the officers on this occasion. Thank you.
Any other speakers? I have to say, I'll declare an interest as well then, and the running club that I used to run for, I don't know, we've run from there on many occasions, and when I was mayor 11 years ago, we actually hosted a lunch there for our German twin visitors and other things happening there. So I have a love for that building and a love for the fact that the local community did club together. I'm not quite sure how the ownership is split up now, but it's an extremely important element of that community, and I applaud it. So can we now move to the recommendation that permission be granted? Please show.
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much. So that, I think, concludes the meeting. Thank you very much.